Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in since we're a little behind schedule, so we can go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me okay? Quick thumbs up. Okay, great. Alrighty, so we're going to talk about some case studies on faculty learning communities. I'm going to give you a little brief background on me. I'm Sudie Whalen with American Institutes for Research. I do a lot of work with collaborative team building, faculty learning communities, professional learning communities, communities of practice. My background is in career technical education. I also do a lot of work around equity, andragogy, adult learning theory, and integrated education and training. So our focus today is going to have a brief overview of faculty learning communities. I actually took San Jose State out, and I swapped them for a different university, University of Illinois, and I'll show you that in a minute. But we're going to look at 3 different case studies and talk about what kind of went wrong and what was great, and so that we know what to look for as we're moving forward in implementation. So let's talk about that. Oh, and then I also have a surprise for you all at the end of the session because I didn't give away all my surprises in the last session. But I see some of my last session attendees are here. You only get one, Carol and Alan. Alrighty, so, but if we don't give them all away, please share that form address. Okay, so why are we here? Why are we even talking about faculty learning communities? Well, when it comes to guided pathways, it looks like one of the biggest challenges we're having is making sure we're hitting that 4th pillar here, that ensuring that learning is happening with intentional outcomes. And so when we're talking about faculty learning communities, we really are talking about being very intentional with trying to hit that 4th pillar. Faculty learning communities engage in the process for improving outcomes is based on data, and it's pretty straightforward, or rather it's circular and cyclical. I just want to go over briefly before we go into what more we're going to talk about, what this really means. First, we collaborate and we analyze the data. We decide, what data do we have? Where are the gaps? How can we be improved? Then we identify our areas of strength and future focus. So when we look at our areas of strength, we look at what we're doing really, really well, and we take time to celebrate the small wins. But then we also sorry. But then we also take time to look for where are the gaps, where are our challenges, where are students struggling, and that's where we place our future focus. We establish goals, both long-term and short-term, to help us meet the long-term goals. We participate in collective inquiry, which is, seeking out best practices, identifying what works and what doesn't. We establish specific tasks, activities, responsibilities, timelines, and resources that are needed in order for us to meet our goals. We implement process, carry out action research, conduct formative monitoring, and then we make adjustments based on what we're learning, right? And then lastly, we monitor the results, and then we repeat the entire process. This is something that's ongoing. So when we think about faculty learning communities, a lot of times we hear, I personally hear, well, faculty learning communities take away teacher autonomy, faculty learning communities hinder academic freedom, and that's the antithesis of what this is supposed to do. It's supposed to bring people together. So what it is a specifically structured learning community of faculty or staff in higher education that includes the goal of building community, engaging in scholarly practice, and developing the scholarship of teaching and learning. That's what a faculty learning community is. What it is not is a perceived method of teaching that removes faculty autonomy and academic freedom. Like I said in my last session, the purpose of it is to bring together teacher autonomy and academic freedom with student needs and outcomes, and putting those 2 things together, and also equity. Because when we're thinking about making sure that my let's say writing 101 class and Carol's writing 101 class, we're both teaching the same thing. We want to make sure our students that exit those classes are meeting equitable outcomes, and that I'm not holding my students to a different standard than she's holding her students. And so when our students graduate, we can't be sure what outcomes they met. No, we're being intentional in making sure that we're fully understanding what's happening. But that doesn't mean that Carol is telling me how to teach and I'm telling Carol how to teach or what to teach. It means that we're peer reviewing our process. I know, Alan, right? I would think so too. Alan said it's hard to see how anyone can perceive of FLCs taking away freedom and autonomy. And that's the thing. A lot of times people think of collaboration as taking away something, and it isn't. It's just a way for us to learn and grow and do better together. So some of the benefits to this, according to Washington State Board of Community and Technical Colleges, actually, faculty learning communities have a lot of benefits, including, but of course not limited to, faculty learning communities stimulate innovation while simultaneously creating experiential collaborative learning environments. These learning communities also provide flexible professional development structures that support learning around a number of different topics specific to instruction and assessment, including technology integration, cultural competency, and importantly, the scholarship of teaching and learning, which is necessary to keep faculty up to date on the ever-evolving field of higher education. Because as you know, and we all experienced this year especially, education and how we deliver it is constantly changing, and what we need to do to meet students' needs is constantly changing. So it creates an embedded way for us to be evaluating that change, making sure we're staying up to par and up to speed on what's going on. Faculty learning communities also increase communication and collaboration among faculty who otherwise, by the nature of their work, are individualized in their classrooms and labs and are often isolated from colleagues. They are very often siloed, and siloed teachers and faculty, it's kind of just the way colleges work, but faculty tends to be happier when they have an opportunity to collaborate. They're more motivated and they actually do better work. My favorite thing about learning communities is the built-in data-driven continuous improvement process, because I'm a data nerd and I like looking at data. I know everybody doesn't feel that way and I understand, but I do. So yeah, there's a lot of really great things to be had and to be learned from faculty learning communities. The best part about it is just the opportunity to learn from and learn with your colleagues, from my perspective. So when we talk about the key questions here, we think about what are the essential knowledge, concepts, and skills that we want our students to be able to demonstrate. I just saw a typo on my slide. It should be our, not out. Students to be able to demonstrate in each major, in each course. In other words, what do you want your students to learn? We also say, how will we know students are learning? That they've learned it. We also ask ourselves, how we can provide additional time and support to the students who experience difficulty. How will we know that they've learned it? And what do we do if they don't learn it? And then lastly, how can we extend learning of students who demonstrate proficiency? What do we do if they already know it? So we're looking specifically at what we want them to learn. We're looking at evidence and of results that tell us how we know they've learned it. We're also looking specifically at what to do if they don't learn it, and then we're moving into what to do if they already learned it. So now let's looking at a couple of universities and colleges that have applied professional learning communities or faculty learning communities specifically, and let's discuss what happened in these situations. So Georgia Southern University, oh, Janie said teaching can be isolating work with limited interaction with colleagues. I've benefited so much from being in an FLC. Thank you, Janie. I'm so glad you're here to share that insight. Appreciate that. So Georgia Southern University, what they did is they tracked FLC implementation and application over 4 years at the university. The focus was on the scholarship of teaching and learning, as faculty learning communities should be, in fields such as health, nursing, biology, chemistry, public health, and teaching and learning. 17 members produced 18 peer-reviewed presentations and 3 peer-reviewed articles on the scholarship of teaching and learning during the 4 years that this process was being researched. So the faculty, some areas of success that they had, the faculty felt supported. Faculty learned new instructional strategies, and they were really excited about being able to apply new research-based instructional strategies. Faculty really enjoyed collaborative research related to learning about new instructional strategies and things of that nature. And so this study itself was literally done completely by interview. The teachers were interviewed, they were surveyed, they were discussed, and they basically coded the qualitative data to figure out what were the trends here. And these were the things that they determined was most common throughout. So when learning the information, I do want to tell you this case study is only about 3 pages long. It's not that long. What do you think was missing from Georgia Southern University's case study? With what you know about faculty learning communities, they're supposed to be, centered on students, based on data. The 3 big ideas is a focus on learning, focus on collaboration, and focus on results. So the 3 big ideas for faculty learning communities. What do you think may have been missing from Georgia Southern's University? Georgia Southern University's case study. Carol said it, student results. Right. There were no indicators of student success included in their case study. So a pitfall to avoid as you're going through the process, and I'm not saying you're going to, that I expect all of you to go back and write case studies on implementation, but as you're implementing is to not overlook evidence of student success. For all we know, they did see improved student outcomes, but if you're not intentionally looking for that, then how do you know that the students are improving? Nowhere in the case study did they indicate that they had pulled data, they looked at anything. In fact, the primary focus of the faculty learning community was to learn new evidence-based teaching strategies, which is great. But we want to learn new evidence-based teaching strategies for a specific reason, that is to improve student learning outcomes. So you want to make sure you're looking at that data piece and on all of those pieces. So yes, Carol, that hit the nail on the head right there. There were no indicators of student success in that case study whatsoever. Let's look at the University of Louisville. So University of Louisville, this study is rather long. So if you want to read it, feel free to. But they had a really interesting framework that I really liked. They started out looking at communities of practice and working as a community of practice, and they moved into a faculty learning community. And then they decided to write about their outcomes, which is what the paper that the study was about. And so the faculty participated in making and reporting all these things. So not only were they part of the community practice and the faculty learning community, they were also part of the research team that contributed to this paper. And it was a lot of really great information in there. So some more background, they had 12 faculty learning community participants that they interviewed. The common themes that emerged, I'm going to dive into all 4 of them, were benefits for faculty, benefits for students, positive features of the FLC experience, and then they often referred to next steps. All 12 faculty, and I put this on here because I thought it was really interesting. All 12 faculty reported extending collaboration to inside the classroom by encouraging collaborative student learning techniques as part of their FLC process. So not only were they collaborating themselves, they're also developing collaborative teams within their classrooms. So I thought that was really cool. So some of their successes, benefits for faculty. The faculty felt the experience was really transformative. Reading, and they included a lot of excerpts from the interviews with faculty and things like that. And it was just really neat reading some of the things that they said. They liked the increase in real-time feedback to students. It wasn't that they didn't have the ability to provide feedback before. By going through the faculty learning community process, they realized that that was a gap, and they decided to intentionally address the lack of real-time feedback happening right then. It's really easy in a college campus and on colleges for us to grade papers and send the papers in and just give it to them and then hope for the best. But they were doing real class time feedback right then and there, which was different for them. And they really actually saw a lot of positive outcomes from doing that. It enriched their interaction and their connection with their students because, like I said, all of them decided to extend the collaboration to their classrooms too. And so by helping them develop collaborative teams, they actually got to know a lot more about their individual students. They created better techniques for teaching teamwork and collaboration within their classroom. They also had a positive faculty peer collaboration experience also. So that was great. Benefits for students. Faculty persisted due to the benefits they observed from student learning. Some of the faculty members even mentioned at some point wanting to quit because it was a lot of work, but when they were seeing the benefits to student learning, they decided to continue with it because they saw the changes. But the changes they saw were improvements in attitudes and efforts, improvements in thinking and understanding, and improvements in teamwork skills. Those are the primary improvements that they indicated. So the next thing was the positive features of the FLC experience. That was another trend that kept coming up. The FLC structure was critical to enabling the faculty to have a transformative experience. So what happened here was accountability and support provided. They felt a lot of accountability and support via the monthly meetings. A lot of times we were like, one more meeting, this is one more thing for me to do. But they actually found that by attending these monthly meetings, they did feel more supported, and they felt they had a higher increased level of accountability for their students' learning because they knew they had to come back and see their peers monthly to talk about how things were going. So that was increased in a positive way. Faculty peer relationships developed within the faculty learning communities. Again, we talk about how college campuses often leave us feeling siloed. This gave them an opportunity to really get to know each other, develop and establish peer relationships, and learn from each other. And then lastly, the identification of resources for collaborative student learning techniques was another thing that they collaboratively did together. And they really enjoyed having the opportunity to learn from each other how to best serve the students and how to move them along in terms of their own collaboration and to learn additional teaching techniques. So the other trend here was just the positive impact of just having the FLC on the campus. The last one was next steps. They talk about how all faculty participants indicated desire to continue working with smaller FLC structures as their initial experience. So all of them wanted to keep going. Some of them wanted to start a whole new cohort. Some of them wanted to go use smaller groups. And some of them wanted to start new cohorts with new teachers. So like an existing person would go and work with that had been in the FLC the year before, would then work with new teachers to get them as part of the collaborative team and developing the collaborative teams in their classrooms. When asked to describe the type of support that would continue their work in collaborative student learning technique, the overwhelming response was continued community support in terms of regular meetings and faculty members with similar goals in mind. And so what they overall found was that the faculty, having had all this time to collaborate and plan and learn from one another, wanted to keep doing that because they liked and found out that now that we've gotten to know each other and now we've looked at all this stuff, we all have similar goals. We all are leaning towards the same thing, and they wanted to keep doing that work. Many describe the support the FLC aided in their professional development. And that's one of the really cool things about faculty learning communities and professional learning communities is that it is a form of embedded professional development. So people really liked having that opportunity to learn. And then lastly, the majority indicated a desire for continued support and community for faculty members who are interested in learning and continuing their learning. So the support was still there. So what do you think with all this information we just covered, and you can unmute or you can put it into the chat, what do you think was missing from the University of Louisville's case study? What was not there? Anything?
Well, I like that they worked on real-time student feedback. I thought that was really interesting. So based on that, did those teaching strategies or assessments or feedback impact the student learning overall?
And that's the part we don't know. We don't, at the end, this is a really long study with a lot of information, but what they didn't look at was there an actual improvement to student outcomes? They did indicate some, like when they assessed them for collaboration, they assessed them for communication, they did identify that that was better. But when it came to persistence rates, graduation rates, or even just course completion and those scores, they didn't report or reflect on any of that. It wasn't part of the study. And so I would argue that as a faculty learning community, the primary goal should be, and I'm not the only one arguing this, it's also mentioned in the book, the primary goal should be student learning, and not just student learning, but faculty learning as well. Alan said, would you say more what you meant by embedded? Yes, I will. So when we're talking about professional development, embedded professional development, what we're talking about is as a part of being a collaborative team, I am learning from you, you're learning from me. But if I learn something new, I'm coming back and sharing that with you. So for example, one of the things my team used to do is we would keep what we called the PD tracker. And so if one of us went and learned something new, we would put it in our little log and we'd say, this is what this is about. And we would say, do we see an impact for use, or is there any reason to do this? And then we would talk about it at our meeting and say, okay, do we want to pilot this and try it out, or do we not? And then maybe one or two people would try whatever the thing was we learned about. And then if it went well, then their job was to come back and teach the rest of the group about what they learned and then how to apply it. And then we pilot again with the rest of the group. And so there's a lot of, and that's like a more extreme example of that. If you're talking about, like for our case, we were working on blended learning and things like that. And this is about in 2013-14. But now if you're learning something new, say you went to the outcome symposium, you learned a bunch of new stuff about implementing PLCs, you would want to take that back to your team and say, this is how we implement learning communities. This is what I learned, and these are the resources that I have. It's a matter of always sharing these new things, so we're always learning. One of the things that's required when we're talking about influencing change is making sure that we are including education. Yes, exactly. When we're talking about making that a part of the process. Yes. So when we say embedded professional development, we're saying that we're intentionally sharing what we learn. So if our goal is to research new instructional techniques, I'm not just going to research and say, okay, I'll tell Katie, Enrique, and I'll tell David, but I'm not going to tell anybody else because they weren't nice to me in the last meeting and they didn't make me feel warm and fuzzy when I was there. Instead, I'm intentionally coming back and saying, hey team, I learned something new that'll help all of us, because as they say, the rising tide lifts all all boats, right? And so that's what we're talking about, is being intentional. We learn something new and cool and not holding it to ourselves, but coming back with that same excitement and vigor and saying, hey guys, this is a really cool thing I just learned. I would love to try to apply it. What do you all think? And then soliciting feedback and information. But the goal is to not just do these things in a bubble, but to make sure we're sharing together and learning together. Good questions, Alan. Thank you. So we talked about a little bit, Carol did, about what was missing from Louisville's case study. Yes, it was a lack of data to support the positive impact on student learning. They did report a lot of positive impacts on student learning, but they didn't share what the data was. That's not to say they didn't have any, but they didn't put it in the case study. So we don't know what that is. But I did love that they were really focused on making sure the students were moving along with them, that their primary focus was on student learning and teaching and being better teachers and better faculty members for their students. So this was a very successful case of a FLC implementation where faculty was really happy about it. Leadership was very happy about it. Students saw some improvements. The only thing that was missing was the actual data to support the student improvement. So pitfall to avoid: not utilizing data as an indicator for success. So we want to make sure we don't leave student learning outcomes behind, that's our primary focus. We've learned that one already. And our next one is not to utilize data, or not to forget to utilize data as an indicator of student success. This is going way faster than I thought it would. Okay, so next is our University of Illinois. This one, I was going to use a different one from University of San Jose, and I thought I wouldn't have time for both, so I removed those slides, and I'm now having regrets for doing that. And that one was about implementing online learning and things of that nature. But this one was a little bit different because they went in with a really detailed plan, and things went a little haywire. So this was their overarching goal. They wanted to plan, implement, and manage effective in-class and out-of-class instruction. This is what their FLC was going to do. They were going to develop and use instructional materials. They're planning to apply research-based techniques of effective instruction, plan and implement evaluation of the instruction. Sounds great. Mentor students and be mentored by senior faculty colleagues. Also sounds beautifully amazing. Make effective use of departmental, college, and campus instructional resources. This all sounds perfect. Like, as I'm going to go in and planning this all sounds like it is going to go great. If I'm making a plan for my FLC, these sound like things that would be wonderful, right? What could possibly go wrong? I want to ask that question. Looking at this, I want you to hear your predictions. What do you think could possibly go wrong here? Anybody? Just a guess. You don't have to just have the information. What do you think? The plan looks great. These are wonderful steps. What could possibly go wrong? Let me put it this way. Have you ever seen a really great plan not go well? David, I'm so sorry. Well, I think this is after you had already graduated, so it's fine. It's relatively recent. While you guys are thinking about what could possibly have gone wrong, I do want to point out that I'm going to be talking a little bit later about this book, A New Way: Introducing Higher Education and Professional Learning Communities at Work. And one of the things that is really interesting about professional learning communities or faculty learning communities is that faculty learning communities predated professional learning communities. It was just kind of a thing on college campuses that people were communicating, they were collaborating. That was the movement, right, in the late 60s, early 70s. And then somehow that dissipated, and then professional learning communities came along, and it was a huge thing in K-12. And then now we're suddenly like, hey, we should be collaborating on college campuses too. Jenny said it could go wrong if funding disappeared, or faculty didn't prioritize spending time on it, or a global pandemic came. The global pandemic, yes, right, the pandemic. Whew. Yeah, those things are all things that could totally, absolutely go wrong. Okay, so let's look at what happened here. This is where they are now. Program leadership has discovered that building trust with participants is essential to success of the program. True. Let's look at the second bullet. The learning community is now coordinated by college administration rather than the faculty. The Call-in School program has begun engaging participants from former cohorts in order to increase credibility and the sense of faculty community. So now they're trying to work on bringing this back. And former participants connect with incoming faculty in the departments to encourage them to join the program. They also attend the annual kickoff event to welcome new cohorts. So basically, they're trying at this point to pull people back in. But what ended up going really wrong Yikes, it's not the best trust building move. Right. I agree with that completely, Janie. So what ended up going wrong here is that the administration kind of took over the process. It wasn't moving along quite fast enough for them. So they took over. And that was the reason why I wanted to put this one and I took out San Jose because I was like, this is so fascinating. Yes, keyword faculty driven. Your faculty learning communities need to be faculty driven and led and student focused, which means that there has to be a top down and bottom up approach. That means that the bottom up, and when we say the bottom up, we don't mean bottom of the barrel, we mean the faculty, the grassroots, the people on the ground actually doing the work, is letting you know what they need, what the gaps are, what kind of supports they have, and you're letting them know as leaders what is the school mission, vision, values, and commitments? What are the initiatives we have to accomplish? What is the budget that you have to work with? Those kinds of things, right? And then we're being very transparent and communicating if we can't afford to do something, if the budget doesn't support it, okay, can we move it to next year and put in next year's budget? Or can we do a less expensive alternative? How can we make this work? But it requires a lot of back and forth between faculty and leadership and working together. But it can't just be one person taking over for everybody else. When we have what we end up having happen when leadership plans for faculty learning communities, you end up with a lack of motivation and a significant amount of resentment. So you want to make sure that faculty is the one driving the process. They're the ones looking through the data and things like that. That's not to say though that leadership shouldn't be involved or SLO coordinators shouldn't be involved. Absolutely. Leadership or SLO coordinators can absolutely serve as faculty learning community facilitators in which they help them and guide them and ask those guiding questions in terms of where are the gaps? Where do we see students struggling? What can we do to improve equity? What are you seeing in your classrooms? What are you witnessing? And Carol mentioned in my last session, sorry to put you on the spot, Carol, but she mentioned how when you're within a learning community, even with the way you do observations is different because you're not going in to just observe the teacher, you're going in to observe and look for evidence of student learning, right? And so that is a good example of what leadership can do within a faculty learning community. What you don't want to do is take over the learning community to the point that it is now leadership driven and they're identifying what should happen. And then the following year, you're trying to figure out how can I get the past cohort members to be part of the new cohort and bring people along when the past cohort members are probably not having the greatest feelings about it since it got taken over, right? And so you don't want to start that all over. What I do want to say though, which is really positive, is that they started out with a really great plan. The problem was everybody wasn't involved in developing that plan. So even if you have an idea and you have a goal and you think this would be really great, you still want to collaboratively work together and help guide them towards developing the plan and get them on board what needs to happen. But when you tell them being the faculty learning community, here, this is what you're going to do, here's your plan, go do it, that's not going to work well because they're not going to be as motivated, they're not attached to it, and you don't have the buy-in needed to make it function and work well. So what do you think? I know you already know the answer to this, but I'm asking anyway. What do you think was missing from the University of Illinois case study? What do you think? And you can unmute and speak if you would like to, or you could just put it in the chat. What was missing? Anybody? Am I just talking to myself? You guys sit and just like turn off your webcams and go eat lunch, did you? Thank you, Janie. Collaborative design and building on the project. Yeah, there was a lack of collaboration. Trust building, good. Anything else? There's one particular thing I'm looking for that was completely missing. Alan's making his thinking face.
I'm realizing that I should have expected this question after you asked it twice before.
I know. Faculty ownership, yes, Janie. There was a lack of faculty autonomy. The pitfall here to avoid is removing faculty from the planning process. So what we've seen from the 3 that I included here, and I really wish I kept the 3rd one in because I thought I was going to have this is going to take way longer. What the 4th one? What's really we're seeing here is that if we remember to look at student learning and put students in the forefront and the focus, and we remember to look at the data that supports those results, and we remember to support and uplift faculty and make sure we empower them to investigate, to discover, to experiment, to learn together, then we can really move along the faculty learning community process. But if we have really great elements of these things, but not all of that, we end up having some areas that things don't go well. So what we saw with University of Illinois was a beautiful plan that didn't work well because there's a lack of faculty buy-in, right? What we saw with University of Georgia was that, they had a lot of really great things happening, but we had no evidence of student learning because their success was based on products developed by the faculty. When you read the case study, that was what was mentioned in the products of the FLC was all the great peer-reviewed things they worked. While it's great to build up your resume and it's great to show what an academic you are, that doesn't necessarily show me that your students are learning. And so that's what our goal is. That's the heart of our work, right? Is to produce knowledgeable and prepared students that we can send out into the workforce, we can send out into the world, and know that they're going to represent our colleges, our campuses, our states, our country as wonderful people, and that they're going to be the future of our world, right? But if we're not focusing on them and we're only focusing on what makes us look good or makes us appear as if we know what we're doing, then we no longer are focusing on what the primary goal is here. So I am way ahead of schedule. I'm sorry, Eric. Is he still even here? No, he ditched me. It's okay. So before we get into my surprise for all of you and then open it up for whatever questions you may have, what other questions you might have, well, I guess I'm doing that now. What questions do you have?
I'd like to ask you, if I could, about the Illinois plan.
Mhm.
It had all of those steps to it, but I guess I'm not sure exactly what the plan was trying to accomplish, because it seems like each one of those bullet points in the plan was like something that you kind of could be doing anyway. I don't know if that's not really
It
making
does.
sense.
It's something you could do anyway without actually having a faculty learning community. And so that's what ended up happening was the faculty didn't see themselves represented in it. And so basically the administration decided these are all the things we want the faculty learning community to do. And so this all happened before the learning community was even established. So by the time the community was established, they were already given their marching orders and told, this is what I want you to focus on. This is what I want you to do. And so they instead were like, okay, we'll do that, fine, and completely kind of checked out. Some of them, there were some people who were really into it, who really showed up and were like really active participants, but by and large, the majority of them just did not want to participate. There was a lot of push and pull, especially in relation to technology integration, how they were utilizing that, in which some felt that, this is really important to have technology integration. This is really important to have faculty learning communities. And some just didn't see the importance in it, didn't see where they were involved in it. So they opted not to come. And so that's why when we decide we want to have a faculty learning community, what you don't want to do is just say, I'm going to create a faculty learning community and I'm going to make sure they do these things. Instead, you want it to be more grassroots and natural. You want to invite people into the conversation. That means getting your professional development omnivores, as I call them, the people who always sign up for everything that are like me, getting your people who are really excited to do things, people who are really eager, people who ask a lot of questions, especially with the people at the meeting who are like, okay, well, how can we better serve students? And how can we look at this data? Those are the people you kind of want to have on your team because they're going to challenge you and make you really dig in and dig deeper. But it really needs to be a charge put to the faculty for them to identify where the gaps are and what we're going to do in return. The things that they listed in the plan are things that would be natural effects of a functional faculty learning community when you let the faculty lead it. But if you're not letting them lead, then you end up having kind of a stalemate process there in which nothing actually happens and they're all just kind of sitting there. And the next year you're trying to figure out how can I get the few people who participate to lead the next year's group. And so and the danger about that is if it doesn't go really well and that trust is broken, then the few people who did do it last year, even if they are leading next year's group, you also have the people who didn't have a positive experience still on your campus who still had that negative experience, and it kind of starts to poison the well. So you want to make sure that you're, just letting the faculty lead the process. That doesn't mean that you let them run amok, that you let them just do whatever they want to do. There has to be a shared understanding that faculty and leadership are holding each other accountable for making sure the whole institution's mission, vision, values, commitments, and initiatives are being followed through. Good question, Alan. Thank you. Other questions? Ooh.
So, Sudie, you referred to San Jose. So what was their study
San
based?
Jose was
Just a
really
brief, yeah.
fascinating. So
Yeah.
let me answer Enrique's question, then I'll get
Okay.
to San Jose. Enrique said, what happens when faculty learning communities don't have a common mission or vision? They should. If they don't have a common mission or a vision, that means they probably weren't involved in establishing what the institutional vision was in the first place. And so one of the things you want to consider, especially if you're going to be revising your mission and your visions anyway, is getting feedback from the faculty so that they are involved in development of it. They know what it is and they have ownership of it. If they don't have a shared or common mission and vision, then one of the things as leaders we want to make sure that they do is that they have an understanding of what our mission and vision is. And if the faculty learning community decides to make their own, that was something we did. We created our own mission, vision, values, and goals for our little team, but it aligned to the overarching district's mission, vision, values, and goals. And so even you want to make sure, to answer your question, Enrique, that they understand what the institution's mission, vision, values, and commitments and things like that are, but also that they have the autonomy. If they want to create their own, they can, but it needs to align with what the institution is doing. But we don't want them to go off on their own. Very good question. I hope that I answered that for you, Enrique. To get to Carol's question, San Jose. So San Jose created faculty learning communities a few years ago just for the sole purpose of integrating technology onto the college campus. They were trying to create hybrid programs. And so what they found, and I really loved that one because they were so open and honest about their challenges, was that some faculty simply didn't feel the need to integrate technology. They didn't think it was useful. I'm sure those faculty now might feel a little bit differently than they did 3 years ago, but at that time, that's how they felt. And honestly, that's not unusual when it comes to technology integration on school campuses in general. There's usually some people who are about tech, and then there's some people who are just like, we don't really need to do that. What's wrong with the way we've always done things, right? And so what they ran into was just some challenges between the let's do tech and let's not do tech side of the house. But what ended up happening was by coming together through the faculty learning community, the side that wanted to go completely online, which is how they end up being hybrid, compromised with the side that said we don't need to be online. And then they decided to come up with some hybrid programs and classes. And so by doing that, this faculty that was against the technology integration felt a little bit more comfortable because they only had to use it a little bit. Students only need to be able to turn some things in. They just needed to be able to post a few things. And this side of the house that really wanted the tech was happy because they were like, oh, we get to actually use the technology. What ended up happening over time, though, was the side that was not interested in technology ended up becoming more interested and more proficient in technology utilization, which was really interesting. The students also became more proficient in their technology utilization. What was lacking from that one, however, was there was a lack of administrative support. They ended up having to do a lot of going back to their administrator in order to find out, could they purchase the additional tech that they wanted to get licenses, enough student licenses for students to have things. And there was a there was a little bit of a miscommunication. We won't say miscommunication, a complete lack of communication in terms of the administration letting them know what the budget was. And it wasn't that the administration was trying to hide it. The person just didn't feel that they needed to report that information at the time. And so when this person said, we would like to purchase X amount of licenses for this hybrid program, they said, sounds great, go ahead. And then when they went to go purchase it, they got pushed back from their finance department, who then told them they needed to get budgetary approval and the budget wasn't there. And so they had to ultimately push back implementation of their hybrid program to the following academic year. And so it was a really great process in terms of how they were grassroots and working together and bringing things together, and how they saw improvement in positive attitude and things like that for staff. They did see some improvement in students. They did have data for that. But what was lacking was the admin buy-in and admin support.
Thank you.
Alan, so the case studies are drawn from four-year universities would anticipate specific challenges unique to community colleges. I think the reason I chose these specific ones is because there are ones that would be more likely to happen on a community college campus. There are some other four-year university issues that they had that are just like, That's totally stuff that happens for your that happens at those colleges. That's not happening as much in community college campuses. But I chose these ones specifically because these are the kind of things that we could run, that no matter where you are in terms of learning community implementation, these are the kinds of issues you could run into. Getting really excited about what the faculty could do, but not focusing on what the students can do. Getting really excited about student learning, but not actually looking at the data to support it. Getting really excited about planning, but not involving the faculty in the plan. Or getting really excited about integrating and working together and doing great collaborative work, but not involving admin until it was too late. So those are the kinds of things that we want to avoid, and they're all kind of applicable to community colleges. I would say for those of you who are SLO coordinators, if you're trying to start this process, definitely start working with your people who are more interested in collaboration. Start with a small team, work as a facilitator to facilitate the identification of those SLOs or revision of SLOs if needed. And then I start looking at, how can we assess our lessons? How do we make sure our lessons are good lessons and that we're making sure students are meeting those outcomes? And so definitely make it kind of grassroots, but definitely include leadership so that they can be involved, because they can't support a process they're not aware of. Any other questions? Great questions. Alan's keeping me on my toes today. I like that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move into our surprise then. I have a book, this one, A New Way, that's written by Robert Eaker and Deborah Sales by Solution Tree, and it's all about implementing learning communities on college campuses. It really points out the difference between doing this in a K-12 site versus doing on a college campus, because they are not the same. And so if you would like the book, you can access it by scanning that link there, or let me get a copy of the URL for you, or follow the URL I just popped into the chat. You will get a free ebook copy of this, no charge. All we need is your name and your email address, and for you to agree that you don't mind us giving your email to Amazon to email it to you. Again, doesn't cost you anything. You can have the whole book, and you can annotate it. You can use the Kindle web app, or if you have the Kindle, an actual Kindle or an ebook reader, or even your phone or computer to read the book. And you can annotate it and write in it and things like that. You're welcome, David. So yes, please follow that link. I have one more session today in which I'll be sharing the link again. And then after that, whoever gets the book gets the book. So yes, definitely follow it. We're finishing a little bit earlier. I don't know what that link is for. Oh, Networking Lunch. Networking Lounge. Thank you, Enrique. So yes, go to the Networking Lounge next after this. If you have questions or you want resources or anything like that, please feel free to email me. I am available and happy to talk all things collaboration. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for those who came to both my sessions this morning.
Thank
Appreciate
you. Thank you. Awesome.
Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all shortly.
Thank you, Sudie. We appreciate it for all your collaboration and cooperation with the SLO committee.
Of course. Thank you, Enrique.